have Segun Sopitan as well as Ajibayo, Adebayo. Both are analysts just looking at the, help us just take a deeper look at the economic implications of this war. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining us. Mr. Segun Sopitan is the principal partner with Woodridge and Scott Consulting, while Adebayo is the head people and culture Smart City PLC. Let me start with you, Mr. Sopitan. I mean, oil prices are rising because of the Israel-Iran war, and it will higher crude prices benefit Nigeria's economy or worsen inflation and fuel costs for ordinary citizens?
You know, it's with regards to crude oil prices, it's always a bit of a double whammy. On the one hand, you would have, because we rely so much on crude exports for our foreign exchange earnings, it would always appear to be a welcome development when crude oil prices go up. But on the flip side, you know, so it's almost like as you are receiving, you have to give back. On the flip side is the fact that we depend so heavily on petroleum products to drive our economy. So even now that we have local refining capacity, the truth is the supply of crude oil to Dangote refinery, other local refiners, as few as that might be, is still indexed against international crude prices. You know, so if crude oil prices go up significantly, then we'll see an increase in prices of refined products, petrol, diesel, aviation, you know, fuel, and kerosene. And that obviously would have an immediate multiplier effect, knock-on effect on prices within the economy. And we've seen that happen in recent months, where Dangote reduced the pump price of petrol because crude prices came down to somewhere within $60 per barrel, you know, $62, $65 per barrel. And then as it started going back up, they hiked their prices again. So we're going to see that happen this time. We'll see pump prices go up. And it's very difficult to measure, you know, which side of the equation Nigeria gains from the most. Is it from the federal government revenues side, or is it from or do we lose more from the multiplier effect, you know, the inflationary pressures that will come, you know, from higher crude prices? And I'd be willing to hazard a guess and say, look, the damage to the economy because of what it does to consumers far outweighs whatever benefits we think we might be getting from government revenues, especially when there's such a disconnect and a dislocation between government revenues and the trickle-down effect, you know, to the economic well-being of Nigerians in the first instance anyway. You know, so for me, it's not so much a positive development.
Right. Right. Mr. Adebayo, let me come to you and ask you, right, because many African countries depend heavily on fuel imports. So how exposed is Africa to energy price shocks if the conflict persists?
All right. Good afternoon, and thank you very much. I would also want to support what Mr. Segun said, that the risk for Nigeria is that Nigeria, like an African country, we import most of our refined petroleum products. For me, I think that the only short-term gain for me is that the higher oil price, the higher crude revenue for us in Nigeria, and then improved FX inflows. But that is if production levels are stable. But the risk for me is that it heightens a lot of security tensions. Unfortunately for us in Nigeria, we're almost entering an election year. And so it will not really be good if all of these things happen. And for me, I think that if oil price increases, prices of transportation, it has a multiplier effect. Prices of the common item in the market increases. Prices of transportation, once fuel price increases, it has a multiplier effect across all boards. And it has also it poses a threat for us. So for me, I would just say that better physical breathing space for government of Nigeria. That's what this crisis means for us in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Sopitan, I mean, with Middle East airspace closures and also shipping disruptions, one has to think about the Strait of Hormuz as well. I mean, this is already going to be affecting travel, logistics, trade, and a very strategic and important route when it comes to oil, logistics, right, and crude oil. How much could import costs rise for Nigeria and other African economies, and maybe the world at large?
I mean, as we speak this morning, as these events have been playing out, some of us, because of what we do, we have to, stay in touch and keep track. And I can tell you that it's in the news that two vessels sank in the Strait of Hormuz, in the last 24 hours, including an oil tanker, right? This was confirmed by the Iranian forces themselves. And that's the way it's going to be. In fact, I saw another message, I think it was on X, from some Iranian allied verified channel, saying clearly that they were going to blockade the Strait of Hormuz and daring the American government to do anything about it. And that, immediately creates a huge dislocation in the supply chain logistics with regards to oil and gas products, given the fact that the Middle East, is a major supplier of crude oil to the global economy and to Africa. Not forgetting also that other trade activities pass through that region as well. So the impact of this in terms of prices will remain to be seen in terms of how heavy that impact is, but there will certainly be an impact. And one of the other things that might slip through the cracks that one might not notice is that even the cost of insurance and freight, CIF, is typically the language when it comes to international shipping, and the insurance part is a significant component, right? So insurance companies are going to be increasing their premium, the premium that they're charging for insuring, transportation through that region significantly, and that will also affect costs. So we will definitely see, besides the impact of increase in crude oil prices, and that might happen, we will definitely see a general increase in transportation costs, disruption in supply chain logistics, and so on and so forth, and that will definitely have upward pressures on Nigeria's economy and other African economies as well.
Okay. Gentlemen, let's quickly go on a short break. And now when we return, Adebayo, I'm going to come to you after the break to ask you about, where Nigeria sees a short-term boost when it comes to foreign exchange earnings from oil, prices and higher oil prices, should the case be. But after the break, stay with us. This is News Now on New Central Television. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. We continue our news this hour with the latest from the Middle East. With the tensions going on with the U.S.-Israel airstrikes, aerial strikes, and of course, following the death of the supreme leader of Iran. We've been looking at oil prices and the cost of the war, the economic cost of the war in the Middle East. Joining us is Mr. Ajibayo, Adebayo, as well as Mr. Segun. They've been with us since before the break. Now, Mr. Adebayo, let me come to you and continue with our discussion and just talk about the short-term boost in Nigeria, or rather in foreign exchange earnings from higher oil prices. If Nigeria stands to gain somewhat of a boost from higher oil prices, will there be any gains for Nigeria? Will there be some sort of economic stability, at least, even for a short term?
Okay. So thank you very much. For me, I just think that for Nigeria, it presents a paradox. For me, higher oil prices may boost government revenue in the short term because, of course, that we import refined petroleum products like major African countries. So for me, higher global prices will also increase inflation. We've been seeing the price of inflation going up and down in the last time. But because of this crisis, for me, I think that because we import refined petroleum products, higher global prices also would increase inflation and cost of living domestically for me. And I think that for African broadly, the impact will be very severe. The impact will be very severe because most of the African countries, or I would say all, are net fuel importers. What does this mean? Rising oil prices will increase, like I said before, it will increase transportation costs across boards. It will increase manufacturing expenses. It will also increase food inflation. We are seeing like a reduction in food prices. But this rising oil prices may affect food inflation, and it will also put additional pressure on already fragile economies. We have a lot of fragile economies. Like I said, in Nigeria, we're almost entering into an election year. So all of these things may have a ripple effect on us. Now, the bigger lesson here for me is structural. African must reduce vulnerability to external stuff. We must deepen local refineries, and that is where I salute the Nigerian government, where we are trying to deepen our local our refineries. We are trying to also ensure that Dangote refinery also thrives. This will reduce our imports. This will also help us to export things, and for me, it will also diversify our economy, and it will also strengthen intra-African trade under the AFCFTA framework. So for me, I think that it would have a lot of positive sides on the shorter term. I'll end by saying that Middle East tension are not just geopolitical events; they are economically stressed for African countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Shukbito, if the conflict escalates into a prolonged war, I mean, from what we've seen now, the Supreme Leader is gone. There are reports of parts of his family, and that's his daughter, as well as his granddaughter and son-in-law also being deceased from the strike that hit his home. There's also a shake-up that is happening within the leadership structure. If this war was to prolong, what are the biggest economic risks that Nigeria and Africa should prepare for?
If this becomes a prolonged confrontation, I think the first thing that we all need to be worried about is our survival. Because the longer this lingers, the greater the risk of it, expanding beyond just that region. We must not lose sight of that possibility, as remote as it might seem at the moment. There are alignment of forces, within that region and outside of the region. And what this could end up playing up is tensions that have been, kind of bubbling under the surface might then become very real and might result in actual confrontations across, nations that at the moment, are just probably, engaged against each other on the economic front. When you start talking of countries like Russia, when you start talking of countries like China, like India, having to pick sides against the NATO allied forces, against the United States, the UK, the EU, and all of that, then you will see a situation where we might have a big problem on our hands. And all of that will hinge on how Iran decides to go over the next few weeks. So if Iran does what they have been doing in the last few years, where they have some sort of a symbolic response, just to show some sort of power and show that they also resisted and fought back, but then they de-escalate. So if they go that way, then the risk of even seeing this prolonged may not be so high. But if for some reason they decide that they want to sustain and they want to attack Israel in a prolonged and escalated conflict, and that they also want to extend that to United States interests across the Middle East, then we might have a big problem on our hands. And if that happens, then obviously what you would then see is that the pressures that we're talking about, first of all, dislocation to trade on a prolonged basis will result in very serious problems for us. Don't forget that during the COVID disruptions, the first significant increase in the price of bread in Nigeria happened, off the back of after COVID, the Russia invasion of Ukraine, and what that did to supply chain logistics and even the supply itself of grains, of major grains that came from that region or that still comes from that region. So if this becomes a prolonged thing, we'll see the effect spread across not just oil prices, but maybe even into food and other services, and that could result in a reversal of the whatever gains we may have achieved in Nigeria over the last year. So one would seriously hope that some sort of good sense prevails in all of this, and we see a de-escalation over the next couple of weeks.
A de-escalation is, what the entirety of the Gulf seems to want at this time. As we understand that negotiation talks are still underway, and I think Oman and I think Doha are a part of those who are mediating these talks. Gentlemen, I must say thank you, Mr. Segun Shukwiton there, as well as Mr. Ajibayo, Adebayo. Gentlemen, I want to say thank you once again for coming on.